All right, this is the plan between now and 4:25. We get done as much of Chapter 4, the lecture part, as we can. In an ideal world, we'll get done with all of it. If we do, then tomorrow when you come in here, we're going to do the end of Chapter 1 for Chapter 4. I'll pass you out a hard copy of that before we leave today. All right, and then we'll also do Chapter 5, which is a very short chapter. Okay? And if we can stick to that, that's great, because then after 2 weeks, we've covered 5 chapters. And I know we've been going fast. I get that. I'd like to try to do 2 chapters a week as much as we can, as long as we can, until we get to the database stuff. And I'm going to have to contact her. Like I said, if I don't hear from Ms. Zika by tomorrow, then I will contact her over the weekend. Okay? So, we are on page 125, how to develop a multi-page application. So as it says, in this chapter, we learn how to develop a multi-page app, which requires several new skills, including how to use session state and how to get data for a web form from a database. Now, there's a whole section on databases later, so don't let the fact that they're getting into databases here throw you, okay? All right. So they introduce you here to their shopping cart application. Then we go into working with multi-page apps. Then we talk about data sources, which is basically where you're getting your data from. You don't have to get the data from a database. Hey, you know what? After yesterday, you're all experts on that, right? You know you can get data from a spreadsheet, for example. All right? And there are other ways that you can get it also. Then we'll talk about session state. And if I've never said this to you, I probably have, but if I never have, HTTP, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, is stateless. And what that means is, by default, if I go out, let's say, to Amazon, and I go out and make a request from Amazon, then I go out a couple minutes later and make another request. Now, if I put them in the same shopping cart, Amazon recognizes that. But technically, to the web server, that request might just as well be coming from 2 different people. All right? That's what it means by stateless. Then, if you look, this probably be about the least favorite part of the class so far. It starts on page 152. Because what you typically do is, for every single table you have in a database, you create a class that goes with it, and you manipulate the database table information using the class. And if you say, well, why? The smart-ass answer is because that's how every language does it. All right? And that's really about the only one that I can give you. So let's get going. Cut this down a little. Move that over. Here we go. All right. So the first thing that they show you here on pages 127 and 128, right here, are 2 different pictures that that represent 2 different pages from their shopping cart app. Now I'm going to shrink it way down. I realize it's harder to see, but just so you can see both of them. All right. The idea, again, as mentioned earlier, is typically if you've got an application of any size, it'll have more than 1 page. All right, which is, I think, what the author is trying to get across to you here. Now, they mention here on the previous page, it says figure 4.1, which is what you see right here, shows 2 pages of the shopping cart app. The order page is called order.aspx, and it has a drop down. All right, that's what's right here, and that's the product that you want. So it's grabbing that from products table. Should make sense to everybody. All right, what's in the products table? We'll find that out as we go on. All right? But it's not at all inconceivable that you could build a form like this and you could grab data from more than 1 table. All right, and if you say that doesn't make sense, it should. But remember yesterday we heard the gentleman who works in IT there asked Ms. Zika to open up one of her tables. Remember, it had 194 fields in it? Okay. That's not a well done table. So let's say we broke that table into 10 tables. All right. And then let's say that if we were going to create one of those forms for her, we needed information from 6 of those tables. That'd be fine. You can still do that. You actually know, we looked a little bit last semester, and that's why I did it. If you remember when we talked about table joins. You know how you can join tables together to get information from different tables. We're going to do some of that this semester. All right, and a lot more of it when we get to the database part. So it says, the product names in this list are retrieved from an SQL Server database. The main difference between SQL Server and MySQL, there's several. If you don't know this, there is a company named Oracle that owns MySQL. All right? And so why am I telling you that? Because Oracle has their own database. All right. In fact, Oracle is one of the best known relational database management systems in the world. In fact, Larry Ellison, who runs Oracle, is up there near Bill Gates as far as richest people in the world. He's worth several billion. Okay? But my SQL Server is basically Microsoft's answer to Oracle. Does that make sense? Now, you can use this, what we're doing right here. You can use Visual Studio not only with SQL Server, but you can use it with Oracle. You can use it with MySQL. You can use it with Access. Okay. About what? I don't know what that is. The point is, not only can you do that, you can use it with virtually any relational database management system. And let's say, well, this isn't what you asked, Ethan, but let's say you raise, what about a comma-separated variable file, a CSV file? You can even do that. So it doesn't even have to be a database. It's a data source. Normally it's a database, but it doesn't have to be. All right? So it says the product names in the list are retrieved from an SQL Server database via an SQL data source or just data source. Then, since the auto postback property is set to true, the page is posted back to the server. That's a really important concept. Let me make this a little bigger. But what you have to realize is every single time you change something in here, you're asking for a new product, correct? And since you're asking for a new product, that's all the product information, so that has to change. And since it's getting that information from the server because that's where the database is, that's why when they talk about the auto postback, that's why it has to be sent. Does that make sense? You say, well, what if I just took the server and I kept it on the client machine? Well, that would work, but imagine Amazon trying to do that, trying to take their database and put it on your machine. Their database is pretty darn big. I'm just going to take a wild guess and say that, because what don't they sell? So it says here on the server, the code behind file, so that's our ASPX.CS file, for the order page gets the data for the selected product from the data source, which has retrieved the data for all products. Then it's going to go through and ferret that out, and it's going to say, just give me the one product that I'm looking for. Does all that make sense? At least at a high level, does that make sense? So I grab this flying bat, and I click the add to cart. All right? So then it puts it in there. Does that make sense? This is not going to be a fully functioning shopping cart system. There will be things in here that we will build on and add on as we go on in here. All right? So, as you probably guess, when you start doing this, you're going to have more files. You know, you have to handle the database and everything else. So you can see here, and we already talked about this, in the app data file, that's where your database goes. All right? In the, there will also be a folder as we get into it. Now notice they've got models here. They're doing actually a little bit of model view controller, and that's good news. I've got, I don't know if you call it a present, but something I'm going to give to all of you, not today, but we'll give it to you next week. If I go into my downloads, it's funny, I found this book. Evan was asking me if I had any books on ASP.NET that dealt with model view controller. And I remembered that one was available literally for free online. So I grabbed it, and he said, well, how new is it? And I think it's 2015, but I could be wrong. 2014. But he likes it so much that when he's going to start teaching next semester, he's going to go through, he said, the first 10 chapters That's how this class is going to change. He's going to kind of pilot it, and if people like that, then this book that we're using now will go away, and the whole focus of the class will go away, and it'll become an MVC class. So you say, well, why don't we do that? Well, because I'm supposed to work with a book that he told me to work with this semester, and that's what we're doing. You're still acquiring skills, and I will still go through chapter 25, but it's only one chapter in this book that's on MVC. All right? Okay. The file is it's almost 10 meg. So I don't know if that's going to be a big hindrance for anybody being that size or not. Hopefully your computers are good enough that they can hold something like that, and whatever. So we're going to add stuff in here for models. And as you can see, you already know the content. You already know the fonts. You know images. You know scripts. So what's new in this chapter is the app data, which is again going to hold our database file, and the models. And those are going to be the classes where we're going to basically have a class that's going to represent the components of our shopping cart. All right, for lack of better words. Now, I just don't have the time to go over all the verbiage that's on the page before that. So, it's not that the stuff on page 126 isn't important. It is important, but it explains the stuff that I just showed you. All right? Okay. How to work with pages with multi-page web applications. The big thing is when you work with a multi-page application, this is not a joke, there are multiple pages. So you have to have a way to go from one page to another. We haven't worried about that before. There are different ways that you can move from one page to the other. We'll look at some of those in this chapter. All right. Now they say how to change the starting page for a web application. I want to show you that. It's not a big thing. It's not a difficult thing. But I just want to show it to you anyway. All right. Are you still taping? Yes, I am. Okay. So let's pretend with the project that we just did, this one. We don't have another page, but let's pretend for a second. So I'll make one. So I'm going to right mouse click. I'm going to choose add, and I'm going to get rid of it right away anyway. But new item, and I'm going to come over to web form, and I'll just grab and I'll add web form 1. Okay? The first page that you create when you create a project is automatically the start page. Does that make sense? It automatically is. If I decide to, if you look up on the screen here, again, not me, but look on the screen. So here's my other page, right? Web form 1. I can right mouse click on that page and I can choose either view in browser, which will run just that page, or if I decide, let's say that was a splash screen and I want that to be my first page, I just do that. And then it'll run that page first, just to show you. Okay, set a start page, right? Okay, I'm going to go back to my default page. I'm going to tell it to run the program. It should run my webform1.aspx page. You look up there, that's what it says it is. Sometimes that happens. You end up, you create an application and you're like, you know what, I should have really had a start page or a something. So that's how you change it. All right. I don't know what's going on with that. Oh, I know, because I didn't put anything in it. That's probably what screwed it up. All right. Now, when I come back here, just a couple more things. And they're all things that I'm sure you probably know anyway. But I go back to my web form. Okay, I'm going to close it. If I want to change the name, remember if I right mouse click on it and I choose rename, so I change it from that. Let's just say I want it to be called for whatever reason. Default 0. Okay, now it's default 0. I've changed the name. It automatically changes the name of my designer CS file and my regular CS file. Don't ever change those. Always change the name of your ASPX file. It'll change the other ones for you. Okay, if I don't want it anymore, now before I do that, probably would be a good idea to go back to my default page and choose set that start page for that one before I remove the other one. So I did that. I don't need this default 0 anymore. I right mouse click on it and I choose delete. Again, notice it's warning me. All right, default 0.aspx will be deleted permanently. It's basically saying, are you sure? So if I click OK, it's not going to say, are you really sure? It's just gone. There is no way that I know of to bring that page back. So if you accidentally remove the wrong page, you're hosed. Okay? So if you're ever going to do anything like that, I would strongly suggest that first you make a copy of your folder. Okay? Do it or don't do it. It's your call. So that's pretty much everything on 131. All right. What?
What if you do the, like you selected for a multi-page application, what does that do?
We're going to start getting into that in just a couple minutes. Okay? All right. Now, they said on 133, they talk about how to add a new class. All right? Well, if we look in here, if we right mouse click and we choose add, all right, and we go to new item, we should notice, I believe, if we look in here long enough, thought there was class in here. There may or may not be. They change this around every once in a while. There's style sheet. There's web form. Well, then let's look and see if we can do it this way. I'm going to right mouse click, and I'm going to choose add. Everybody see what's on the very bottom? See that? Okay. Now, the recommendation that I've always heard is that if you're going to start adding classes, you right mouse click here. Everybody please look at the screen. Choose add. And now you want to choose add ASP.NET folder. All right. And you should put an app code folder in there. Okay. Now, it's going to change. We're not going to exactly do it like this because we're going to be doing some model view controller stuff. But historically, that's the way it's been done. Okay? So, showed you how to add a new class, etc. So we went through at least what we needed to know so far for that stuff. All right. Like I said, when we go through this tomorrow, you'll be able to see it, for lack of better words, you'll be able to see it in action. All right? So, turning to page 135. That's not the one I want. That's the one I want. Turning to page 135 in your book. I'm trying to keep up here. Notice that there's different ways that you can move from one page to another. And there are differences between them. Notice, server.transfer. It says whatever page you're on, go to page cart.aspx. Response.redirect, which says go from whatever page you're on to cart.aspx. And response.redirect permanent, which tells you where to go. So if you look up here, they talk about the differences between them. The first one, transfer, terminates the execution of the current page, means it's like it closes it, and immediately transfers you to the next page. It's fairly abrupt, for lack of better words. Redirect, redirects the client to the specified URL and terminates the execution, all right, of the current page. The first one terminates and transfers. This one redirects or transfers and then terminates. All right, it's considered not quite as an abrupt way to do it. The last one, the redirect permanent, have you ever had this where, a good example, in fact, I'll show it to you in just a second. I think I showed you this. I'm going to go out to here right now. I'm about to go out there right now. So bring up the net here, and I'm going to go to java.sun.com. Everybody agree with that? Hit enter. And it moves me to www.oracle.com/technetwork/Java. All right, why? Because it did a redirect permanent. Because that's the old address that you would go to get to Java's homepage. But it's not functional anymore. The stuff's not there. It's where this one, that went to, the Oracle thing. So they did a redirect. Now, if I'm not sure if they did, if the language they're using is probably not ASP.NET, but they did a redirect permanent anyway. All right, just to show you what that does. So if you want a little bit more, it's on pages 134, and the description, it's on page 135. All right. Now, when you think about it, there are actually other ways that you could move. You can do this too. You can actually put URLs into buttons, and you can move from page to page that way. So we're going to see all that stuff as we go on in here. All right. Page 136 and 137. How to use cross-page posting. All right. It says basically what I just told you. You specify the URL of another page in the postback URL of a button control. Then when the user clicks the button, an HTTP post message that contains the URL is sent back to the server. As a result, you're going to go to that page. Now, that may or may not make sense, but just imagine that, looking back at what we just showed right here. Okay? I'm going to go and add another page like I did before. So I'm going to do an add, new item. I'll keep it, like we said, webform1.aspx. That's fine. I don't want that to be my first page. And let's just put we'll put a label in here. Now look, label's back. That's weird. All right. And I'm going to put in here text equal hello. That's all I'm going to put. Hello. All right. So if I look at that in design mode, pretty obvious what's there. Okay, now I'm going to jump back to my default page. And this is the same one that we had before. All right, I don't care. I've already got a copy of this anyway. But I'm going to come back to here. And I'm going to go back to in fact, I'll go back to here. And I'm going to go into design mode to make it a little easier on myself. And I want to jump into design mode. All right. Again, this is going to look a little funky the way that I've got it, but that's fine. Hopefully it'll work okay. But in fact, this is what I'll do. I'm going to go to the calculate right there. I'm going to remove the code that's in it in just a minute. I'm going to actually remove the code that's in my calculate. And I'm going to go here to postback URL. All right. I'm going to click there, and I'm going to choose webform1.aspx. All right. Now I'm going to go into my buttons code here. Come on. The actual C# code, which is open, that's why. All right. And I'm just going to grab everything that's in here, and for now, I'm going to comment it out. Hopefully I did that correctly. We'll find out. All right. Now I'm going to come back here to my default page, save everything. Hopefully I don't get an error. Now you realize that the application is no longer functional, right? All right, but when I click calculate, what's going to happen? Well, it still gives me that. No, it's because I have those validators. What should have happened without the validators is it should have jumped to the other page. All right. I like that. Even when I screw up, you're like, yeah, I know what you mean. Okay, that's good. So if you want more on that, they go through that on pages 136 and 137. All right. Okay. I'm going to take for granted, you correct me if I'm wrong, okay, but I'm going to take for granted, if you go up to page 139, that you all understand the difference between an absolute URL, which starts with http://www. And a relative URL, which is where you currently are. Okay? I also want you to understand something, and do they show it here? No, they don't. What we'll be getting to later, yeah, well, they do. What we'll be getting to later is this. That, you can see it in your book, but you can't see it well on here. It's a tilde. You all know what a tilde is? All right. Well, in languages, it means something. Like in Spanish, if you put SENOR, and you put a tilde over the end, it's now nya, so it's senor. But here, the tilde is going to mean It's kind of where we're starting from, for lack of better words. So you're going to end up using that tilde. You'll use it a lot more when we get to like chapter 8 or so, and we talk about master pages. All right. But if you need more on the relative and absolute URLs are on 139, and on the end of it, it says, if you're specifying a URL for a property of a server control, you can use the web application's root operator, the tilde, to base the URL off of the root. Okay? All right. Now, let's talk about new stuff. How to create and use data sources. All right? I will tell you, all right, let's put it this way. I will suggest that especially, if we do end up working on this project and we do something with databases, which sounds like it very well could happen, and it's not Access, because pardon my French, but we don't want to piss Tiffany off. All right? So can't have just Access. So if we're going to end up using SQL Server, this is the way that we have to do it. All right? So what happens is, just so you see this, if I come back here and go back to our code here, notice, everyone look on the screen, please. Under data, those are all the things you use with databases. So if I want to create a new data source, I can just grab a data source, and usually it'll be an SQL data source. You can drag it anywhere you want because it's what's called a panel control. It comes in down here. You can put it anywhere. It doesn't matter because it's invisible on screen. It used to be in older versions of this, when you dragged it, you'd always put it down at the very bottom, regardless of where you put it. Now it puts it up here, even though it's invisible. All right? Now, when we do this, and it's not going to make sense now because we don't have a database, but we'll come in here and we'll click that arrow that's here, and we'll tell it to configure the data source. And we'll have to have a database. All right? So once we do that, so in here, in the example they have in the book, we'd be using the Halloween Superstore. Does that make sense? And then you start to step through it. And you can say what you want from the Halloween Superstore. You can grab a single table, or you can do a join where you grab information from multiple tables. We're going to get into all that stuff. That isn't really in your book until around chapter 13. Did you hear that? But I just wanted you to at least be able to see it. So as they show on page 141, that is how you create an SQL data source. Now, when you do that, again, I haven't doing anything here, but what we really should do if we're doing that is I should right mouse click on here. I should choose add. I should choose add ASP.NET folder, and I should have an app data folder. That's, even still, that is where your database should go. All right? And all that is on page 140 and 141. Once you get in and start working with it, again, if I had a database here, if you would all please look on the screen or in your book on page 143, you're going to get to this. What this shows you right here, and I want to, again, you're not probably going to remember it anyway, but I want to run over everything that's in here with you. If I click here, the second of these two radio buttons, then this is a drop-down list that has every single table that's in my database. All right? We've chosen the products table. And from here, we're saying what we want to do is we want the product ID, the product name, the short description, the long description, the image file, and the unit price. Notice what we don't want. We don't want the category ID, and we don't want the on hand. That makes sense? If we wanted everything, we can just check the top box. All right? But if we only want some of them, or if we want it to appear in a different order, then we click them in the order we want, and it builds the SQL statement for you. You see that? Not only that, when we click next, there'll be a thing on there that says test query. And you can go in and test it, and it'll show you the results you're going to get back. Now, if you get back 10,000 records, it's just going to show you a couple of them. All right? Now, what else can you do? If you click up here for specify a custom statement, you can write your own if you do that. Okay? We'll get to all that stuff, but later. Now, right now, it's going to show me everything, correct? Remember when we did the where clause where we put criteria in there? So select star from employees, where department equal accounting. That's where the where comes by. All right. Remember the order by to put things in ascending or descending order? That's the order by. All right. And what will happen when we start doing this, when we click advanced, there'll be a button that we will click and it'll write a bunch of code for us. That's what's in there. So this is all stuff that you're going to be seeing as we go on in here. Again, if you need more, or it's what's going to end up happening is something like this is going to be built for us. Looks pretty ugly. That's just the name of our data source, the run at equal server. This connection string, that basically when you choose your database, it builds it for you. That's internally how the system is referring to your connection to the database. All right, this is the thing that you built right here from the previous slide that we saw. All right, and that's everything that's in there. Now, it's possible there could be more in there too. There are security settings and other things. We don't talk about those till chapter 13 or whatever it is. The good news is when you start working on this stuff, as it shows here on page 145, it's wizard driven. So there's an actual pattern that you use to doing this. After you've done it a few times, I'm not that stupid that I'll say, oh yeah, you could do it in your sleep. No, but it makes a lot of sense the more you do it. That's all I'll say. When you work with this stuff, if you look up on the screen here, okay, it says here, select the data source, select the data field, all right, in the drop-down select a value. That might confuse you. Okay, so let's talk about what this means. This, as it says, that'll be your data source. This, select the data field to display in the drop-down list. That's what's actually going to show in there. It doesn't necessarily have to be. It's going to have to be based off something. So if I've got where it says product right here, let's say the name. Let's say that this name is the name of the product. So let's say I've got 3 products. I've got product A, product B, and product C. I know those are stupid names. I get that. So that's what's going to display here. That make sense? On the other hand, where it says select the data field, that's going to typically be your primary key. Remember your unique record identifier? So that'll be the product ID. So that'll be 1, 2, and 3. So 1 is product A, 2 is product B, 3 is product C. So in other words, what we display here is for human beings. What gets put here is what the machine needs. Does that make sense? Again, we'll be doing this in much more depth and breadth of coverage later on. I'm just trying to go through what they go through in the book and not hit you with too much.
So you just want it to pretty much always be the primary key?
It's going to be the primary key. I mean, if you said, well, 100% of the time, I can't say anything is 100% of the time, but that's the way it normally is set up, yeah. All right. Then they say how to use C# code to get data from a data source. The good news is, I don't oftentimes do things maybe right, but sometimes I do. And the idea is you should be able to understand what's in here. Okay? Because what are we doing? For lack of better words, we're telling the system to grab these fields and put them into our local variables. Well, where are we getting these fields from? Code that gets product information for the selected product. This is telling you to get that information from the database. And then you're telling it to copy that information into our local variables so we can manipulate it, look at it, or whatever. Much of the work, think about this. From our meeting yesterday, what I heard that Martha Campen, the lady who sat next to me, I heard her say the stuff that she does. It sounds like she does a lot of different stuff, but a lot of the stuff that's done there, I think that people do, they're not changing information, they're just generating reports and stuff like that. All right? Those are select statements. give me the information. Those are not inserts, updates, and deletes. All right? That's where the heavier lifting code comes in. That's...
They really shouldn't put DESC for these.
What's that?
They shouldn't have put DESC for these things, because it kind of reminds
Oh, for description?
Yeah, it reminds you of descending,
Yeah. All right. Turning up to 148. I already mentioned session state. I already mentioned the fact that when you work with session state, HTTP is called stateless. All right? I don't know if you know what cookies are, and I don't mean the kind you eat. We've talked a little bit about them before. But cookies are when basically a server writes information to your machine, for lack of better words. All right? They're not executable files. There's all sorts of articles you can read online. Cookies are bad. Cookies are evil. No, they're text files. All right? Typically, there's only a certain number of these files that can be written to any machine. All right? And the size is usually around 4K. They're just information. All right. So it says here, where am I? By default, ASP.NET sends a session ID to the browser as a cookie. That session ID is unbelievably important. The session ID is going to be something, it's going to be a long string of characters, almost 40 characters. All right? And you might say, well, big deal. Well, let's say that Amin's online and he's ordering a bunch of stuff. Whatever it is. He's on Amazon and he's ordering a bunch of stuff. All right? If I'm able to go and hack in, he's doing stuff online, and maybe the site that he goes to, maybe not Amazon, maybe it's someplace else that isn't set up well. If I can grab his session ID, I can do what's called session hijacking. So as far as the system knows, I'm now him. So if I can grab his session ID, I can order a bunch of stuff too, and so I can just have it sent to a P.O. box or something like that. You see what I'm saying? Don't think stuff like that doesn't happen. It does all the time. So that's why when you send things like session IDs, you've got to be very careful with them. In fact, what oftentimes happens is it might be that every 10 minutes or so on Amazon, your session ID gets regenerated because it's all new numbers and letters. That way it's harder for people to steal. But they show you this on page 149. I don't expect you to understand this. But this is, as it says, how ASP.NET maintains session state. Take a look at it. All right. And then underneath it, it says, why do you even care? Keep information about a user. To save objects. This is the big one. This is how companies make money. I may have mentioned this to you in a previous class. I don't know, but I'll always remember this. All right, before I got smart, I would buy my own karaoke CDs. And I remember once going out and putting a CD into a cart, and then for whatever reason, I didn't buy it. And I came back, it was almost a year later, and that CD was still in my cart. All right, so it saved that information. Some of them, as soon as you get out, by default, as soon as you quit a session, 20 minutes after you quit, everything that's in the session goes away. You can set it up so it immediately goes away, or you can set it up with something like a cookie. You can tell it to last indefinitely. All right, I could set a cookie that says put something in there into a and save it for 1,000 years, and it would do it. I wouldn't be around to see it, but it would do it. All right. So again, bottom of page 149, ASP.NET uses session state to track the state of each user of an app. It creates a session state object, which has got that session ID. All right. Next, we get into how to work with session state. Notice if you look at the code that's on page 151, okay, that the word session can appear on the right-hand side of an equal sign if you're setting something, or on the left-hand side of an equal sign. Okay? And not only that, you've got session there, session cart. Okay? What goes into that session can be unbelievably complex. You can have all sorts of different stuff in there. All right, the business classes of the shopping cart app. If you look on page 153, okay, they mention here, it says, now that you've learned the basic skills for developing a multi-form app, you may think, no, I haven't, but that's what they say. All right. Now it says, let's take a look at the code that we're going to have. So figure 414 that you see that takes up right here on page 153 summarizes the members of 3 business classes. We've got a product class, all right? We've got a cart item class and a cart item list class. Think about what this means. The product class has got a database. From the database, it's got a list of products. That probably makes sense to you. The cart item class has got each item that we're putting into our shopping cart. And the cart item list class has got the members. So it's each individual product that we're putting into each item. So imagine that I go in and I'm ordering a bunch of stuff from the Halloween Superstore. Okay? And I go in and I order 6 different products. Then each one of those products will be shown in the product class. The cart item class could hold all 6 of my products, and the cart item list would have each individual product. Does that make sense? So next they go through the code. Notice the product class. Pretty darn simple. Does it make sense if you look on your screen here for me to say that the product class, all they are getters and setters? Next semester, you're going to work much more with getters and setters in Java. It's done differently than here. That's how it's done here. Okay? It looks like it's not doing anything. Yes, it is. It's automatically writing some code for you behind the scenes. Okay? Then you've got the cart item class. I'll let you take a look at that yourselves. But the author has done a good job here that when you're working on something, he puts comments in to explain what's happening. Right? I don't want to go into too much detail. First of all, 3:30 in the afternoon is not a great time to start talking databases for the first time when the class ends at 4:30. All right. And second of all, we're going to have a whole section on this when we get to chapter 12. So they show the code for the cart item list class on page 157. And again, I don't expect you to be able to look at that stuff and have it make a boatload of sense to you. It's all right if it doesn't. Bless you. Again, we're going to go through it in much more depth and breadth of coverage. All right. So, turning to page 159, the web forms of the shopping cart application. Here's your order page. All right. I'm not sure why the author did some of this stuff, but the key one is here. If you look up on the screen. Datasource. That says that we're grabbing that information from a database. That supposes that you have already set up an SQL data source. You've already done that. So when you run this, that's what's going to give you the drop down for all those different products. That's what they're talking about right there. Then you'll notice we've got a button there that says add. Anybody want to take a wild guess what that add button is doing? It's adding it to your shopping cart. So you go and you check, you choose a Freddy Krueger mask. And I want that. You click that add button, it adds it to your shopping cart. All right, so it becomes a new line item in your shopping cart. It's got to copy all that information that it needs. The name of the product, the price of the product, etc. Okay? And that's what's happening there. Then you've got the order page. Now think about it, really. Try to think about it. First of all, notice that at the top it says using system.data, which implies that you're going to be working with databases. All right? The other thing that's in here, it's the order page. Now what are we doing? Well, it's one thing for me to order, but wouldn't it be kind of an important thing that if I'm going to go and order something from a company, that company's database of products gets decremented? So if I order, if I'm McDonald's and I am ordering 10,000 buns, okay, then I'm ordering them from Wonder Bread or whatever it happens to be, that their inventory of buns goes down by 10,000. That's what basically is going to have to happen in here. It's going to have to set up everything for me. But in this case, since we're working with a shopping cart, this is completing our order. So if I'm adding 6 different products to my shopping cart, it's keeping a running total. So it's going to show me before I buy them, these are the 6 products that are in your cart, Jeff. You ordered this at $30, this at $20, etc. Your entire bill will be $212. You will have $15 in tax, etc. That's what's going to end up being built in here. Hopefully that makes at least some sense to you. All right, then you've got the cart page, which will actually display for you the stuff that's in your shopping cart. It's funny when you look at it on page, I'm jumping all the way up to page 169 here. But if you look at this on page 169, I'm asking you a question. That is the entire CSS file, right there. Why is it so small? I'll give you a hint. It's at the top of the screen. It's because most of the stuff we're doing using bootstrap.min.css. So the only thing we have to worry about is what we want to override from the bootstrap.min.css class, which is the stuff you see here. All right. And that's pretty much it. So let's take a look at this. I've got a handout for you. This is what we will work on tomorrow. The question got asked, well, what about the thing we did today? By tomorrow at the end of class, I'm hoping that everyone, whether you finished it already or whether you're going to look at the code that I gave you, all right, we'll be able tomorrow when I pass around the flash drive, you'll be able to add your chapter 3 thing to that. That makes sense? Here we go. Probably why I hit extra. All right. So that's them. So let's take a look at what we'll be working on tomorrow. So how does this change? Take a look up on the screen. It's an enhanced version of our price quotation. This hasn't changed on the home page except for 2 things. You should be able to immediately identify what they are. We've added another button that says confirm, and we have a message down on the bottom of the screen that says enter price and discount amount and click calculate. Kind of a helper. Or you can look at it if you got somebody who doesn't really know what the hell they're supposed to be doing, they can look at that, right? When we click the confirm button, look what happens. We go to another screen. Notice this says price quotation. This changes to quotation confirmation. And it's got the same information we had before, the 150, which was our sales price. We don't care about the percent, but our discount amount and our total price. And then we also have this, send confirmation to. All right? And then send quotation. That's not going to go anywhere necessarily, okay? We don't care right now. But this is kind of important. What does this button do right here? Takes us back to the first page. You may or may not have realized that, but what I tried to show you later that I kind of screwed up on, remember when I put the button to go to the other page? I have no way of getting back to my original page. So I click the back button. That doesn't always appear on here. And on ASP.NET apps, clicking the back button doesn't always work. All right, so you want to make sure you always give the user a way to iterate their way between pages. So what do we do? Open up this in your exercises folder, etc., etc. It says open up. I'll have to see if I've got that, and if I don't, I'll give it to you. If I do, rather, I'll give it to you. It looks like it's got a starter file. All right. Add the confirm button, add this, and add the C# code. Well, what's going to be big here, and again, we'll go over all this as a class, but there's going to be more code here than we had in the project today. All right? All right, what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to attempt to do something. We'll see if it works or not. That is, it's 3:51. Get out of here till 4 o'clock. And at 4 o'clock, or if you want to break, at 4 o'clock, I'm going to try to go through Chapter 5. It's a very short chapter. We're going to see if we can get done with that. Then tomorrow we can concentrate solely on Chapter 4. And if there's any time left, we'll do something else.